It is our pleasure to be joined by a man who you've seen his beautiful face all over ESPN as an in-studio analyst. You hear him on SiriusXM radio, and probably most importantly, he is responsible for getting me some free Hanes underwear last year. Dalen Cuff is in the house. What's going on, man? Long time no see.
It's been a minute. Good talking with you guys, and I'm happy for your Hanes. That's great. I'm doing what I can.
Yeah. Listen, I love free stuff. And Ted, Dallin and I were doing some radio together, and we started talking about underwear randomly, and about a week later, some free underwear appeared in my mailbox. How about that?
Amazing. That's why we do this, right?
Exactly. Free stuff.
Underwear.
Free stuff. Your boys need a home, as Cosmo Kramer famously said. So we're good.
That's great.
There you go. All right, let's get into it, man. I know you're busy right now. Let's start with Thursday. Looking at that East region, Michigan State, Kansas State. I cannot wait for this game. I love this matchup, but Marquise Noel going back to New York City, that he is a dude. Do you think Izzo can pull it off? Right? There weren't a ton of high expectations for the Spartans heading in the tournament, but they're favored in this one.
They are favored. Let's just start there. I do like Kansas State on the money line. I think Kansas State is the better team, and we look at their resume, have better wins against tougher competition, but the brand name Michigan State carries, and Vegas knows that. Just like Kentucky was the favorite by 3 points against K-State, I think that was a brand name favorite. I think that's the same thing with Michigan State. That said, Michigan State can obviously win the game. But if they defend well, and to your point, if they take Marquise Noel out of the game, then Kansas State can struggle to score, and that can be a bit of a problem. That said, Michigan State really struggles to score at times, and if they rely on making 2-point jump shots, so they did early in that game against Marquette, that plays to the hands of the Wildcats. So I like them in that game, but I think it's a very entertaining game, and anybody can come out of the East region. I'm just leaning to K-State in terms of that game.
How much does we hear this all the time, and I know it's a talking point, but Michigan State obviously has as a program has a big history in the tournament, right? Izzo's got a long history. How much does that really matter? Is that overblown? Is it the talent on the floor, or does that history actually factor in?
Where the coaching really factors in the tournament, I mean, obviously matters in game, but it's that quick turnaround, Thursday to Sunday, Saturday or Friday to Sunday, that you prepare your team real quick. You get them to scout. What do they need to know? How do they need to get it? How can it be digestible? Also, are you extracting what needs to be done with your coaching staff to even translate that to your players? Like, that's where the coaching element really comes into play. That said, this is a 4-day prep, 5-day prep. And these teams are going to be ready to go. So I think it's not as big a deal. And the history of the stuff doesn't matter. Like, just like if the teams that didn't win, like haven't won against, people always say, we haven't won there since 20 years ago. Who cares? Those kids were 2. Like, it doesn't, or they weren't even born. Like, it doesn't make a difference. Now, in recent history, if you've struggled in the tournament, you've played in it and you've struggled, and you've played certain teams and you've struggled, that stuff translates, which this group is a little different there. So I don't think the history plays in so much. Like I said, I think it's baked into the lines and baked into the narrative. But as far as players, not so much. And the coaches, I think both staffs, but this is not the quick turnaround, which Izzo, I think it's like 24-7 in the quick turnaround games. So there is something to that. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason.
Right. So sounds like you like the Wildcats in that one. The other game in the East is FAU versus Tennessee, which if FAU wouldn't have tried to dunk it at the end of that FDU game, they'd probably be everyone's favorite, and everyone would be cheering for them in the tournament. But my number one question for this game is we saw what Tennessee did to Duke, right? And partially the refs let them do it to Duke.
Yeah.
But do you think FAU can hold up to the physicality that Tennessee brings?
How the game is officiated will be huge, as you mentioned. I mean, there was a football match, a football game, and a basketball game broke out on a court. Basically, was going on there the other day. That said, Tennessee, Olivia Cumwell was great. Made a ton of shots when they went zone. Duke went zone to protect Jeremy Roach. They exploited it after a couple possessions. They settled in, so they played very well and they played their game. FAU has not better guards, but just more mature dudes. Like, physically, that's where Duke lost that battle. Physically, the guys couldn't stand up to it. I think FAU has a better chance. I still like Tennessee in this game. I'm not touching the line. I do think if I'm playing, I would probably lean toward the Owls plus 5.5. Because I think it's probably going to be a low possession type game. But because Tennessee can really struggle to score 2 at times, I just don't. We'll watch the game. We'll see how it goes. I ultimately think the Vols win, and what will be probably a pretty heinous matchup in terms of the actual aesthetics of the game.
Yeah. Do you think anyone from the East, like, I know you think Kansas State comes out of there, but any real threats for the overall tournament from the East?
I Once you get anybody can do it. Like we've seen that there's no, like, Alabama has separated a little bit through the course of the year. Of course the season for sure, but their performances through the tournament have been solid. But anybody can beat anybody this year. We've already seen that. There is no dominant team. Obviously, Tennessee beat Alabama. So if Tennessee comes out of this thing, they were at home when they beat them earlier in the season, the SEC. But if they face off again, that's that familiarity that the team is important. Also, the way to beat Alabama is to get up in them and be physical, particularly Brandon Miller. And Tennessee, again, does that better than most. And Tennessee forced, I think it was like 20-plus turnovers in that game the first time they met. So if they come out, that's probably the worst thing for Alabama. And those of us that have Alabama, winning it all, or even Alabama to get to the final. I played that pre-tournament at like plus 400 or something like that. So that's not ideal for those of us that are on that side of the things either. But yeah, anybody's capable of doing it. Tennessee probably poses the most threat to actually winning a Final Four game. But I say that, but Kansas State would have some interesting matchups as well as with Michigan State. All of them are capable.
Anybody listening can probably at this point tell that Dalen likes to put a few shekels on these games, which I love when he adds that stuff into his analysis. Now the other region in action on Thursday is the West region. And dude, I think Arkansas UConn has the potential to be the game of the week in the NCAA tournament. I picked UConn to win it all. I like how that team is built, but there is no doubt that Arkansas has the athletes. The question is, hey, can they hit enough shots, right?
Yep. And you're dead right. They got athletes and got pros. Arkansas has, and UConn's got athletes and they got some pros. And that's both those teams. I think you're absolutely right, and that is the most anticipated game on the docket for me. I think you're going to see a game that can be played at an up and down tempo. Guys that can make shots, can make plays, can score in the interior and the exterior. If it gets into a half-court game, teams can still execute through that. Like there's just both those teams can score in different ways and be versatile in terms of how they play. Both are very good defensively, so they're going to challenge everybody. Sometimes challenge you at the rim and sometimes on the perimeter. So I think it's a very evenly matched game. UConn's laying 3.5 points. It's another game that I'm not betting that game because I think it might be a live play situation as you see how that game unfolds in the first 10 minutes of the game. But I think it's going to be a highly entertaining game. I ultimately have UConn winning that, of UConn playing Gonzaga in my Elite Eight. Before I thought UConn would be playing Kansas, but they're not. But I still think UConn's team, guys, we've heard this thrown around. I've said it for the last couple of years now as it continues to hold true. The top 22 in offensive and defensive efficiency per Ken Pom have won the last 5 years. You had to be in that top 22. UConn's one of those teams. Texas is one of those teams. Creighton, Alabama. Those are the 4 teams left in the tournament now that have that recipe, if you will. So 4 of the 16. And I do think that you're going to see a high-level UConn team is capable of winning the national championship. But can they get through Arkansas? It's a matter of, can they make them take enough contested shots? And does the inexperience of Arkansas show up, which it didn't against Kansas. Kansas made some inexperienced plays late. Arkansas did not.
What's been the difference with Arkansas? I think a lot of people would say that they had kind of a disappointing regular season, but here they are. They knocked off Kansas, as you mentioned, and probably going to be a great game with UConn. What's been the difference with them, if anything? Maybe they just have put a couple of really good games together.
That's health. Nick Smith's a top 10 pick. They didn't have him for the majority of the year. They had other injuries throughout the course of the season that the guys were in and out of lineup. Obviously, Trayvon Brazile never came back, which he tore his ACL. We knew he wasn't coming back. But they've dealt with a lot, and now they've found their ability to gel down the stretch and have guys they can rely on, they believe, and guys that are kind of filling in their roles and finding their place and finding their footing, especially for a freshman like Nick Smith that I think has played maybe 10 games. He's really still trying to figure it out, and he's not one of necessarily their key guys. He doesn't get a ton of minutes. I think he played 20 minutes in the last game, but he's kind of indicative of where their team is. They're trying to still find their way, and they have a lot of talent. The one thing they do is defend. They guard so they can keep themselves in any game.
Looking at that other game in the West, I love this game too. Gonzaga, UCLA. Is this where we finally see Jalen Clark's absence magnified for UCLA? Or does this Gonzaga team that doesn't quite have as much talent as we're used to seem like, do they have enough even without Jalen Clark going to be being on the floor for UCLA? What do you think?
Well, it's trite but true, but styles make fights, man. And Gonzaga wants to get up and down and make it pretty, and UCLA wants to get it down and dirty and play a half-court game. So who can impose their will on the other? And it's way easier to slow down a game than it is to speed up a game. So I could see UCLA finding a way to get their tempo, but can they score enough? And will they be able to stop Gonzaga in the half-court too, which isn't easy. And I do think this is the game where they miss Jalen Clark the most. He's a player of the year in the conference, defensive player of the year in the conference, second leading scorer. This team, again, struggles to score, so they like to score off their defense, or they got a lot of deflections, took you out of rhythm. He was their main dude to do that. He's out. Chris Singleton is supposedly, he had an ankle injury, their best shooter. He's supposed to play. We'll see if he's 100%. Obviously, Dembona's still battling his injuries, but he's played pretty well in the one game he played last weekend. So I think there is a question of health for UCLA and a question of tempo for the game overall. I think Gonzaga wins the game. I think they'll be able to execute enough in the half court. I don't think Mark Few's crew has gotten the love. They're a very good college basketball team. The thing that people are conflating as not being good is, they don't have a one-and-done guy, which they've had the last 2 years. They haven't had. Those are special players. Those are unique teams. He had a team that you literally, that one year with Gonzaga and Baylor, we just penciled them in to the final and then filled everything else out around it. It didn't matter. But that's not normal. And I think this is a normal 3-seed, very good college basketball team with a stud inside and Drew Timme, a pro and Julian Strother, and other really good guards and wing players that can win this game. And I think they do. They are also they are also the underdogs. I'm going to take them on the money line, but I think it's going to be a very tight one-possession game. I'm just leaning Gonzaga.
Just quickly, a little off topic, but UCLA, it's good to see them back and having a good squad. How are they going to mesh in the Big Ten? What's that going to look like? Is that going to be good for their basketball program?
Man, I tell you, I haven't even thought about that in all honesty. The thing about what would be interesting, the way they play in terms of slowing it down, grinding the pace, they fit in the Big Ten in that way. They might maybe have some access to some more high-level athletes. But you look at the last 3 years of the Big Ten. They have had terrible success in the NCAA tournament. I've said this a number of different times. This year they have 8 teams. 1 team gets out of the first weekend. I think it was 2 years ago they had 10 teams. 1 team got out in Michigan, I think. Last year was very similar ratio we're talking. And the issue here is they play a brand of basketball that's pretty antiquated now. Slow, half-court, plotting bigs, limited athleticism on the wings. And when you have some of those special players, they really pop. The Johnny Davises from Wisconsin last year, Jaden Ivey from Purdue. Those guys really pop. And they're very good players. And they may be able to take you kind of far in the tournament, but they don't have the full team, the full complement. So if you're UCLA, you do not conform to the Big Ten. You try to do what you've done, transport it over there. If you don't win the Big Ten, I would say get to the point, who cares? I would try to build a team that's capable of winning the tournament. So if I was trying to play in the Big Ten, I would look at how do I get 5 out and how do I get a versatile 5-man to step out and play with pace and space and play a more modern basketball. And you may take some lumps. You'll take some losses in conference, but I do think that sets you up better to compete with the SECs, the ACCs, the Big East, the Pac-12 when you get into the big dance. So that's my approach if I were the Big Ten versus continuing to do what may win in that league but doesn't translate more broadly.
I think that's a tremendous point. Okay, looking at Friday's slate, San Diego State, Bama. San Diego State's old, man, but you think they got a chance in this one?
I just don't think they can score enough. They're the same thing. They're gonna grind the tempo, and they're gonna wear on you. They're gonna be physical with you. The question is again how that game is officiated, because there is a recipe, as I already said, to beating Alabama, especially slowing down Brandon Miller. You've got to get up in him. He's got to feel you every single possession, and not just wear on him. And it makes it hard for him to get to the spots he wants to and be comfortable and play in a free-flowing manner. That's a way to beat Alabama. They give you that. I don't think they score enough at their end. In Alabama, we continue to not talk about. We talk about the three-point shooting, get to the free throw line, driving ability, the modern basketball. Free throws, threes, layups is how they play offense. Well, defensively, they're elite. They're top 10 in defensive efficiency. They've got great athleticism on the wings. They've got great versatility. They've got rim protection. They got everything you want. So they can really make it hard for a San Diego State team that can already struggle to score. So I think ultimately, I don't love the number is, I believe is it 7 or 9? I think it's 7 still, maybe 9 now. I don't know, but it's way more than I wanted lay in a game that maybe low possessions. But I think Alabama does win rather comfortably though.
It's been impressive how good they've played considering all the distractions and conversations going on around them. Princeton and Creighton. Princeton's been a fun little story to watch. What do you think about this game?
I mean, as much as I don't like Princeton, I'm very happy to watch
Columbia
it.
guy. I can't imagine a Columbia guy.
We have the light blue on for me and everything. Well, that's just more about a jealousy thing. I think I was 1-7 in my career against them. We lost like 4 overtime games. So there's a little bit of bitterness I'm carrying 20 years later. That's healthy. In terms of the game, I want whoever our league representatives to play well. So it was fun to see them against Arizona not even play well and just out tough Arizona and win that game, beat them on the boards, make the right plays defensively down the stretch. Missouri, I thought they would struggle with the athleticism and the pace a little bit and the ability for Missouri to turn people over. They dominated that game, completely controlled it. They're getting 10 points against Creighton. I'm taking my 10 with the Tigers. We're going to keep on rolling here. I don't think they win the game. But Ryan Kalkbrenner, who is a star for Creighton, their big man, when he can struggle is when you pull him away from the basket. And now Tosan Awoma is a name people now know from Princeton. He was the league player of the year last year, first team All-Ivy this year. 6'8", 6'9". He's a point forward. He leads the league in assists. He's going to be bouncing off the bounce, trying to finish around the rim, kick out the shooters. Everything kind of runs through him. So Kalkbrenner is going to be playing away from the hoop a lot. And that makes it a little more hard for him to be as impactful in the game. And I do think that they could maybe exploit an advantage there and stay in that game and keep it close. I really do like Creighton's team. I like them since when they started getting Kalkbrenner back in January. Had him at a plus 1,200 Final Four ticket. So if that hits, your boy will be pretty happy about that.
Nice.
But we'll see. I still like their team a lot. I just like the 10 points. I think Princeton's playing well enough to keep it from getting blown out.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. I hope it's close just because I think that would be a lot of fun. Now, the other region in action on Friday, the Midwest, Miami and Houston. Do you think can Miami compete on the glass with Houston, or are they just going to get pounded on the boards? That's what Houston does, man.
That is the key. And you actually saw Norchad Omier. He demoralized Trace Jackson Davis in that game against Indiana. Like he got 8 offensive rebounds, 17 for the game. Just was quicker to every ball, reading it in the air, and he's got guards around him. There's always 4 guys on Miami's team that can go get you a bucket. That is abnormal in college basketball. So that's tough. Now Houston's a great defensive team, and they got a number of guys that can get you buckets the other way. So this is going to be a great matchup, but it does come down to the boards. You're right. Miami has to clean it up, has to allow it to be one and done. And they need to push pace. They want to get that ball through and go the other way and score and try to score before Houston's defense is set. So that is the battle is, can you rebound? Not just to not get scored on, but that's going to help their offense critically. Houston's 4th in the nation in offensive rebounding rate. So Miami's got to stand tall. It's not just Norchad Omier. It's got to be everybody. Jordan Miller and Isaiah Wong, they've all got to stick their nose in there and get rebounds. But on the other side, too, Houston's not a good defensive rebounding team. They're 151st in defensive rebounding percentage. So they'll give it to you on the offensive side. On the defensive side, playing in a weaker American conference, they gave up quite a few second chance opportunities, maybe a place for Miami and Norchad Omier to gain some hay as well. So the boards will be so critical in this game on both ends.
Xavier in Texas, Texas with a lot of athleticism. How do you think Xavier contends with that?
Real quick, Miami's getting 7 points. I do love those 7 points, though. Just want to toss that in there as well.
I love how you're just tossing your bet at the very end.
Just letting people know. Just letting people know.
Analysis bet. Boom, I love it.
Or no bet. Or I'm going to lay up. Trying to show some discipline in some of these games. We don't need to bet them all.
That's a lot. They teach that. They teach that discipline at Columbia. Look at you.
They do. Wait till we're middle of the games with live betting left and right. But anyway, I digress. The Texas Xavier game, Xavier without Zach Fremantle, still they figured out how to play without him, and they've been good. Their draw, I think, helped them in this tournament to this point. I think Pitt was gassed last game, and as Pitt even came back, just didn't have enough. And Xavier was a better team. Texas's defense is going to be the problem here. Xavier's very much guard oriented. They're going to want to score. They want to play a kind of open game. Texas is Rodney Terry's done a great job of at times extending their defense to press and speed teams up. You saw them do it against Kansas last 2 times they played and take Kansas out of rhythm. They've got physical guys. They've got adults, man. They got a lot of grown-ups, a lot of 3rd, 4th, 5th year guys that have been around and played at different places. And despite the adversity they went through, this is their time, they feel. So I think defensively, that's going to be a bit of a problem for Xavier. And then defending for Xavier has been an issue all year. It's kind of optional at times. I think Texas is going to be able to punish them, score, win that game. I do like Texas -4 in this game. I think they control it on both ends and win by maybe 6 or 7.
All right, man. I love that. That's all 8 games. Just knocked them out quick. Now, you got time for a Final Four prediction? Who do you got? What do you think?
I'm going to stick with I had 3 of my 4 from before, so we're sticking with that. So we have Alabama, Texas, and Gonzaga were the 3 that are still alive. Out of the East now, I'm going to take Kansas State to emerge there. Alabama beats Kansas State. Texas beats Gonzaga. Alabama, Texas final. Crimson Tide will find a way to, as Teddy's point, continue to manage all the off-the-court stuff, which is far more important, but hard to compartmentalize. I think they find a way to do that, and they're the most dynamic team, and they show that and end up winning.
Nick Saban just
eviscerated Nate Oates. That was great. That was great.
Toss some fuel on that fire, man.
Well, that's his program, bro. He's like, I built this thing. People know a lot. I mean, you're tearing my name down. I'm going to come out here and say something. So I respect that.
Oh, Dalen, you're the best, man. You've been doing an awesome job all season long. Even though we haven't done radio together in a while, I see your face so much. I'm like, I know that guy. Thanks, you're the man,
I appreciate
dude.
it, guys.
Appreciate the
kind words. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of the tournament.